Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Hi, my name is Sean Sellers. I'm a senior product strategist here with DoubleTake Software. I've been part of our product strategy team for over 11 years, probably maybe even 12, and currently responsible for our Linux product and our cloud products as well. So a couple things before we get started. As far as logistics goes, I just wanted to point out that everyone's phone has been muted, but if you could put your questions in the Ask a Question box, and we'll get to those at the end of the presentation and the demo. So thanks very much. So hopefully everyone agrees today that Linux is as popular as ever, and that's why you're here, and also to learn more about DoubleTake and how we can help with migrations and workload portability with Linux. But my opinion is that the cloud has helped drive the popularity of Linux along with open source in general. You have a lot of projects that's been participating in the cloud space along with Docker and some of these other popular technologies, and that all just helps stimulate and pull Linux opportunities and growth as well. So you can take a look at this chart here at a couple data points. And the first one here from the cloudmarket.com, you can see that the number of Amazon EC2 instances are primarily all Linux, some distribution or another. There's a little bit of Open Solaris and a couple other distros that you don't see too often. And then even Azure is, at this point in time, I just checked this a couple weeks ago, 1/3 of all instances are Linux of some flavor. And if I remember right, just this time last year it was around 25%. So we've seen a good portion of growth already in Azure. And IDC also reflects that in a report for the market growth in 2015 that Linux grew around 10.4%. So how did we get here? And basically, if you take a look at what the modern data center looks like today, it's no longer just physical servers or hypervisors, Hyper-V or vSphere. You have your private cloud and your public cloud, and often it's a mix, especially for a larger company. A larger company may have a span of all of these components or different types of platforms in their environment. So it's really getting complex, and moving from one platform, whether it's physical, virtual, or cloud, to another one is kind of daunting and also complex. So it can be a very tricky process that you need to be concerned about. So change is always occurring. This really only reflects infrastructure as a service. So I guess I should say just infrastructure, period, because we have physical here too. So if you throw in platform as a service and software as a service, that's a whole nother twist to this and as far as moving your workloads around. So how did we get here? Change is always a constant factor. We have evolving needs, data retention, big data demands, HA requirements, DR requirements, test requirements, and as part of those evolving needs, technology tries to solve those needs, and those, so we have technologies like virtualization, private cloud, public cloud, software as a service, and so on. And often those technologies bring other advantages, especially around performance. So we have faster processors, faster and higher capacity storage, and faster networks. And another consideration is, besides technology and our evolving needs in that technology area, we have business changes like acquisitions, where you go and one company buys another, and now you need to, you have different environments in each company, and you need to consolidate. So, that's another factor as far as how your IT evolves and changes from that acquisition. So what does workload mobility really mean? Obviously, it means you should be able to migrate the entire workload from anywhere to anywhere, but it's really about how do you handle all these challenges and adapt to these things like constant change and trying to optimize where your workload's running, keeping your users online, and so on while you're doing that. And just to kind of hit the point home here, or drive the point home, there's risk often involved. So I'm sure everyone's deployed an environment. There was adoption, and you get comfortable on that environment, and then the next thing comes along, whether it's the cloud or whatever's coming out, beyond that. But those things can be daunting, and when you need to move from the platform that you're now comfortable with, you start to think about, well, can I do this in a timely manner? Are my users going to be online? Can I do it fast enough? And really, how much is this going to cost me? So just to kind of summarize, and I think this kind of makes the point from the previous slides, but as far as workload mobility goes, what's really important? What are the characteristics that you want to look for? You want something that's flexible, that's not intrusive, so that you can install it on the majority of your servers. You don't have to make changes to your network or your storage. There's no other components required, and it's efficient and very easy to use and manageable. So let's shift to DoubleTake now that we kind of have set the table here with the scenario and the problem that we're looking to solve. And I just want to briefly touch on the DoubleTake brand family. So DoubleTake has a line of products primarily around HA and DR, as well as migrations, and those span physical, virtual, and cloud. So we have those solutions for Windows. We have those solutions for Linux, which is what we're really focusing on today. And we have a product called DoubleTake Share, which is also supported on IBM I and AIX, but that's a little bit different of a product as far as the technology goes. It's implemented differently. It's a different architecture, and that's really about database sharing tables and rows within a database. So if we look at all the products above DoubleTake Share, those all use the same replication technology, same architecture, and it's really just a matter of the business logic that's different and the optimized workflows to accomplish the specific task that we want to take a look at. So let's drill down a little bit more into DoubleTake. And at its core, DoubleTake is really flexible. So it solves the problem of running on physical, virtual, or cloud. It doesn't really matter. It's agnostic to the platform. It doesn't really matter what the hardware is, the storage is, or the operating system is within reason. Obviously, we can only test certain boundaries of operating system support, and we have different capabilities, such as we can migrate granularity down to the file level, or what we call full server jobs. So we can basically mirror and replicate an entire server stack, which would include the operating system, the application, and that's what we call our full server job. And it's very easy. It works with most business applications out there and is very flexible as far as the licensing goes. And it's reliable. It is a real-time, byte-level asynchronous replication product, so that means we replicate real-time as we see changes going down the I/O stack, like RAID 1 disk mirroring, and we send those across the network as fast as we can, and that's the asynchronous piece. So we're WAN optimized. We are very efficient about how we mirror or synchronize, and we have different options to handle that. So we really have no distances as far as any limitations. So we built into the product, obviously your workload and the data change rate may impact that. We guarantee write order consistency, so every I/O that we see on the source is played back exactly in the same order as the target. We have encryption and compression, and we can change the throttle on the DoubleTake traffic itself. So if we need to share the network with other applications and users, we can throttle back our DoubleTake replication. And we always try to make it easy to use. It's automated setup and configuration. Where possible, we try to eliminate human errors and do things like provision of VMs where we can, and provide alerts through different methods like SNMP or email through SMTP. and also have an SDK, which we'll touch on a bit more here in a minute. So drilling down a little bit more, double take move for Linux, which is really what we're going to see today as far as the demo goes and focus on. So double take move is our migration product. We also have a version of move for Windows, but double take move for Linux lets you migrate Linux workloads from anywhere to anywhere, from physical to virtual, from virtual to cloud, from physical to cloud. Doesn't really matter what direction you're going. You can even go cloud back to ground if you find out that the cloud isn't the best thing for you. It has very easy licensing. Basically, a migration license is time-based. You have 60 days to complete the migration, and we also provide some flexibility where you can use, once you purchase, if you purchased Windows migration licenses, and the keys are actually usable on Linux as well. So once you go to actually install the product, if you have extra Windows or move codes that were purchased for Windows, you can also use those on Linux. And I mentioned earlier the full server capabilities. So we have full server one-to-one, which we'll show here in more detail, and we also have full server to ESX, which has some built-in functionality for the ESX operating system or hypervisor. So that is where we provision virtual machines to make it a little easier on the user. As far as support goes, Linux support in version double take 8.0, we support probably the most popular distributions here: Red Hat, CentOS, Oracle, Enterprise. Those are all variations in the same family. And so 5, 6, and 7 are all supported for all 3 of those. And I wanted to mention that we also support the unbreakable kernel for Oracle Enterprise Linux, which is something we've been focusing on recently. So we see more unbreakable kernel on Oracle Enterprise. Celeste 11 and 12, Ubuntu 12.04 and 14.04, the long-term support versions. And then we also support the standard file systems, ext2 through 4, XFS, and BTRFS, which is new in 8.0. So that's an up-and-coming file system with some additional functionality like snapshot support and so on built into the file system. Okay, so let's take a break here and dive into the product a little bit and show you how it works. So what we're looking at, and just for the sake of full disclosure here, my environment is all virtual in VMware. So the source machines and target machines that I'm working with are all virtual, but I did want to emphasize that these machines could be anywhere. They could be on Hyper-V, they could be in AWS. That doesn't really matter, but just for the sake of my demo environment here, it's easier for me to run everything under VMware. And now we're looking at the Double Take console. The Double Take console is a Windows client that supports both Windows and Linux, and I have pre-populated the console with a number of Linux servers that I have also already set up jobs for to save time during our session today. But we'll walk through what the steps are. So once you install the console on Windows, you can actually go to the server screen, and if Double Take's not installed, and you wouldn't see a version here if it was not installed, you can just right-click on it and push install Double Take. So we make it really easy to install the product or uninstall the product from the console. To take a step back, to add the server, you just click the Add Server button, enter its fully qualified domain name or IP address, username and password, and you click Add, and it'll add it to the list, and then you can do the install. And then once you have your servers in the list, you can actually proceed to setting up your job. The first step would be to right-click on the server and click Migrate. In this case, if we were running our other products such as Double Take Availability or Double Take DR, you would have Protect, and Recover is for when you want to recover from to the standby server, to the replica. So we're going to migrate, and we're going to set up basically a full server one-to-one job. And we're going to walk through and set up the job I already have running, and I'll cancel it at the end because we'll get some validation checks that stop us, but the workflow is the same. You'll see how we walk through to set it up. So we'll click Migrate. Here is our choice, our opportunity to pick which job type we want. We have the full server one-to-one and the full server to ESX. So full server one-to-one, basically the target is going to become the source after we do the cutover. Full server to ESX is a many-to-one, so you can have multiple source machines connected to a target, and that target also has some special functionality that will provision replica VMs for each source, and we only have the target machine running while we're migrating, and then at cutover we'll spin up those replica VMs that DoubleTake created. So it's very efficient from a resource perspective. You don't have to have a VM running for every source machine because you just have the single target that we're writing through, and then we'll swing the disks over to the replica after we cut over. So we're going to do a full server one-to-one. Here are the data stores, the volumes that I have available. By default, everything's protected or selected for protection. I can also modify that and get down to files and folders level by modifying what we call the replication rules here, and I can include or exclude specific files and directories. So then we'll click Next, and we'll pick the target here. In this case, we're going to go from CentOS A to CentOS B. Now it's going to go out and get the options that are available for this particular job. And we have our job options. So here we have CentOS A to CentOS B. That's our job name that'll show up in the console, and you can customize that. By default, we're going to wait for the user to initiate the failover or cutover. So it just, once it's in sync, it just won't automatically cut over, but you can, if you deselect that, it would just automatically cut over and the target would come up and switch. But most users like to have control over that. And we also have the option to shut down the source server. We have target scripts and pre and post failover processing scripts. So if you have other automation that you want to hook into DoubleTake, as far as the migration goes, you can do that through these script points. So that makes it a lot nicer to do other things like send email notices or start another server or whatever the process might be. By default, we have the option, we're going to apply the source network configuration to the target, and effectively that is the IP address and host name, or I can retain the target information. And in this case, it's just going to retain the IP address, but it will change the host name, and that's the way I set it up, so we can see that once the server cuts over. And then we map our adapters that are within the Linux operating system to a target adapter. In this case, my source has 2 network adapters. The target only has 1, so I'm going to just not configure ETH1, so it's going to go away on the replica, so that won't exist once we cut over. We have different mirroring options, so whatever, depending on the application, you might want to choose a different mirroring option that spans anywhere from just checking file attributes to doing a block checksum of the file to make sure that the content is actually the same. Orphan files, we can delete them. Orphan files are targets that exist on, or files that exist on the target that don't exist on the source, so we can decide whether or not we want those deleted so it's more consistent after cutover. We have compression and bandwidth limiting that we mentioned earlier. Click Next. And then this is what we call our pre-flight check. And it's going to go through and verify that we have everything's in good working order. We're not going to have any conflicts. And here it already detected that I already have a job, so that's a red flag. So something is already set up on one of those on the target machine. And it's telling me I'm probably tight on my disk space or have too much disk space allocated, which could be a sign that if I needed to fail back, I might, if I consume that, I might be kind of tight going back the other direction. So I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel here because we do already have the job set up, and let's switch over to the job screen now. So here you can see that I already set these jobs up in advance. I have my full server 1-to-1, and I have 2 servers going to this LVRA target. Now notice this is an Ubuntu source going to DT-LVRA2, which is also an Ubuntu machine. But I have Oracle Enterprise Linux going to that same Ubuntu target. So you can go from different distributions and versions to different target versions and distributions with the VRA or full server to ESX job. So now that this is set up and you can see that we're all in sync, let's go through a failover real quick. So if I open up my Windows here, okay, so CentOS B is my target. CentOS A is my source. Everything looks the same right now, but let me log in. Okay, so first notice I have different desktops, and this is CentOS A. And just to show you that at my prompt, I also have CentOS A as the host name, and CentOS B at the top, as well as in the prompt. So these machines are unique, and now we're going to do the cutover. I'm going to tell DoubleTake use the most current copy of the data, live data, rather than failing over to a snapshot, which actually isn't supported with the Move product. It's supported, snapshots are supported with the availability product. So now we're cutting over, and what DoubleTake will do in this case is first it's going to shut down the source, and there it goes. Shortly here it should start shutting down the target. We'll keep an eye on that. And as part of shutting down this target, what we're doing in the background is preparing it to come up as the source. So what we're doing is what we call system state processing. We're swapping that identity around, putting the data that we replicated from the source, we're putting it into place on the target so it'll be proper when it reboots and comes up. This will just take a minute here to boot it. It's not too long. So the source is down completely. Go ahead and close that window. So again, this is our full server 1-to-1 job. And while this is booting, I'll just talk about the full server to ESX job and how that works. So what happens at failover time with the full server to ESX job is the target appliance, basically we disconnect disks that were provisioned for the replica VM, and then we pivot them over to the replica VM, do our system state processing, and then we power it on and boot it. And we do all that while the other sources are still replicating to the target. So you can already see here in the top left that it's CentOS A. And the double take console shows that it's still kind of pending to wait to get the status. So the job's still cutting over. Double take is waiting for basically the double take services to start. Then it'll know it actually is cut over and it's completed. Okay, there we go. Get our login prompt. So notice now, even on the window, VMware still thinks it's CentOS B. On the desktop, we have CentOS A. And if we log in, we have the desktop, the moon and vast space there that we carried over from CentOS A. So basically, it has become the source. So that is a migration of a Linux server, specifically a CentOS 5.11 server, I believe, is what version I'm running. So let's switch back to our slides and kind of wrap it up. So what you saw just now was our standard double take product. And we also have an extension to double take move called the Cloud Migration Center. And it uses a web-based console that helps you migrate from physical, virtual, or cloud to specific cloud platforms. So you kind of think of the user experience as a lot like a software as a service type of user experience. When you purchase double take move, you can take the license keys and use them in the Cloud Migration Center, where we do a lot of work for you as far as provisioning the VMs in the clouds that you see on the right, OpenStack, Azure, VMware, Amazon Web Services, and so on. It works a lot like Move. It uses a full server job, but it does have some other requirements currently, such as requiring, well, I guess it depends on where you're coming from and going to, such as if you're going from AWS to Azure, you wouldn't necessarily need a VPN because double take can encrypt data in flight and run, basically you go directly across the internet. If we need to get behind a firewall, you might require a VPN. So basically what you see is on the left is your on-prem configuration, and it's going through a VPN tunnel into the cloud, one of the clouds that we mentioned earlier, and you have a subscription where in CMC you define all these environments and you set up your jobs, and you can see some of the steps that we provide on the far right, the migration steps. You log into the console, the web-based console. You may need to deploy a proxy server, which helps us with the discovery and command and control. So you can see that proxy server at the bottom left. And then you set up your jobs and then do the migration. So basically, once you're ready to migrate, those VMs will spin up automatically, just like we saw with double take move earlier. But again, this is a web-based console, and it's working specifically with cloud platforms to make it a better user experience. I also wanted to mention that we do have a full SDK that provides both REST and SOAP-based interfaces. And you can look at our SDK, check it out at sdk.doubletake.com. There's also a PowerShell interface that we have PowerShell commandlet extension. So if you don't want to do something low level with REST or SOAP, you can use our PowerShell command set and approach it that way. So let's recap, and basically, we talked about, what the modern data center looks like and complexities. We took a look at the double take product suite and with a focus on the Move for Linux product, and you saw a demo of a migration using double take Move for Linux. Talked about our Cloud Migration Center and our APIs. And if you have more questions or you want to learn more about us, here's some links for you. You can go to our website or our Facebook account or YouTube channel and check out some videos there. In addition to this one, this is being recorded, by the way, so you can watch it at your leisure later. And I guess we're probably ready for questions and answers, hopefully, if they're not too challenging. I think we should be able to handle what you have. Any questions, Angela?
Hi, Sean. Thanks very much for that. We do have a couple of questions, actually, about the full server to ESX target. How many source servers can you connect to a full server to ESX target?
Okay, good question. There's no hard limit in double take, but basically the limitation is on the target we provision virtual disks, and that's because that's a VM. We have a VMware imposed limitation, which is basically the number of disks times the number of SCSI controllers that a VM is allowed to have. So you can have 4 SCSI controllers and 128 VMs per SCSI controller. So once we hit that limitation, that's kind of the hard limit for us. So whatever combination of disks you have on all your sources can't exceed that value on the target. And then the other factor would be, data change rate, network bandwidth that's available. So even if we could provision all those disks, you might not have a big enough network or a fast enough network to sustain the change rate that double take needs to replicate. So it is one of those it depends answers, I guess.
Okay, I have another question, actually. It seems to be a 4-part question. The first part is it only one IP? Is there only one IP required for data transfer?
Yes, we only require one IP address, and you can change the route for double take. So if the target server does have different subnets, as multi-homed, you can define which subnet you want double take to use. So in a lot of cases, with backup, for example, you'll have a separate backup network to keep the traffic off of, not conflicting with your applications and users. So you can do the same thing with double take. You can select which network or subnet you want double take replication to be sent across.
Okay.
Yeah, we only use one IP.
A couple of questions about the firewall ports. What firewall ports between source and the server running the double take application should be allowed?
Yeah, there are several ports that we require, 6320, 6325. I think there's a total of 3 or 4 depending on which job type you're using. I guess the best recommendation there would be to refer to our user's guide, and we have a section in there for managing the product with a firewall, and that's all covered there. But yeah, that's basically anywhere from 2 to 4 ports, depending on what you want to do.
And is there a need for the source server to communicate with target ESX infrastructure or physical servers?
Yeah, so that depends on which job type you're using. So if you're just doing a files and folders job or a full server one-to-one job, we do not need to talk to the hypervisor or the cloud. And that's the beauty of that particular job type, is that makes that job agnostic. It doesn't really matter what the platform is. We can go from the source to the target on any platform. The full server to ESX job does have specific vCenter ESX integration and does require ESX credentials to do those things like provisioning, creating the virtual machines and creating the virtual disks as part of setting up the job and doing the cutover and swinging the disks between the target appliance to the replica VM. So the full server to ESX job does require ESX permissions or an account to do those things, but not the full server one-to-one.
Okay, I think we have one last question here. Does the target have to be the same distribution and version as the source?
No, it doesn't. And, well, just to clarify again, that depends on which job type you're using, but if it's full server one-to-one, it does have to be the same distribution and the same major version, but not necessarily the same minor version. So you can go 5.5 Red Hat to 5.8 Red Hat, or vice versa with the full server one-to-one. For the full server to ESX, it doesn't matter. The target can be, and by default, we provide a pre-built virtual machine on Ubuntu with DoubleTake pre-installed, and that comes in the form of an OVA that you can just import into your ESX host. And if you want, you can build your own on Red Hat or CentOS, but the source machines can be any distribution that we support that you saw in that slide earlier: Red Hat, CentOS, Oracle, Ubuntu, going to that target. So with the full server to ESX job, that has the most flexibility as far as going across versions and distributions.
Okay, so I think that sort of concludes the questions that we have today. I just wanted to make everybody aware that there are some attachments and links available, including the presentation today. So if you want to download that, please do so. Anything else you'd like to add, Sean?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. I appreciate everyone's time today, and hopefully you got something out of it. Check us out on our website, and if you have any questions, definitely reach out to us and let us know how we can help.
Okay, thanks very much to Sean and to our audience today. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.